Between the years 1100 and 1400, winters could kill. The nights stretched for 14 hours. Snow covered everything, and even a single mistake, a forgotten ember, a cracked roof, could mean death by morning. Yet somehow they survived. Not through strength, not through wealth, but through wisdom. Ancient, quiet wisdom that's almost vanished today. You won't find it in survival manuals or YouTube prepper channels, because these weren't tactics, they were ways of life. So tonight, let's travel back to the forgotten fires, the whispering forests, and the frozen fields of medieval Europe, to rediscover the survival secrets that kept millions alive through centuries of darkness and cold. Close your eyes if you like, and imagine yourself walking through a stone village in the 12th century. The smell of smoke, the flicker of torches, the soft crunch of snow under leather boots. Let's begin. In a world without electricity, heat was everything. But medieval people didn't waste it. They trapped it. A peasant's home was built like a living cocoon. Thick walls of wattle and daub packed with straw, mud, and horsehair. The floors were earth, not by poverty, but by design. At night, ashes from the day's fire were spread beneath animal skins to trap radiant heat. The air might freeze, but the ground stayed warm. And the heart of every home was the hearth. It wasn't just for cooking. It was a sacred space. Families gathered around it as if it were alive, feeding it, speaking near it, sleeping close to it. Modern preppers build stoves and heaters, but medieval families built rituals of warmth. They knew surviving winter wasn't about the tools. It was about the rhythm, the discipline of fire. Today, we think survival means stockpiling cans and freeze-dried meals. But medieval people had no cans, no freezers. Still, their food could last entire seasons. They practiced what we'd call layered preservation. First, salting. Second, smoking. Third, burying. Yes, burying. They used the frozen ground as a natural refrigerator. Fish wrapped in birch bark and buried deep would stay edible for months. Root cellars dug below the frost line could preserve cabbages, turnips, and apples deep into spring. And fermentation, the quiet magic. From sauerkraut to ale, they turned decay into nourishment. Each village had its own recipe, guarded like treasure. They didn't store food. They stored knowledge. Recipes, rituals, timing, passed from mother to daughter, from shepherd to son. A secret many modern preppers ignore. True preparedness isn't what you store. It's what you know how to create. If you think medieval peasants just froze in rags, think again. Their clothing was a masterpiece of natural engineering. Wool was life. Lanolin mitch, naturally water-resistant and insulating even when wet. They layered it in ways we've forgotten. A rough inner shirt of linen to wick sweat, then a dense wool tunic to trap heat, then a cloak, not loose, but pinned tight across one shoulder to seal warmth like armor. And their secret weapon? Fur-lined hoods. Not hats. Hoods that trapped air around the neck and shoulders where most body heat escapes. Modern winter coats are synthetic, loud, fragile. But a medieval shepherd's cloak, woven by hand, could outlast a decade of storms. They wore less gear, but survived more cold. At night, families didn't sleep alone. In most homes, animals, goats, chickens, even a cow, lived under the same roof, divided only by a wooden half wall. The reason wasn't sentiment, It was survival. Their body heat alone could raise the room temperature by several degrees, and their breath, heavy and slow, added humidity to the dry air. It was a living heating system. When morning came, the people and animals walked out together, each keeping the other alive through the long frozen dark. It wasn't luxury. It was interdependence. A harmony that modern survivalists, with all their gear and gadgets, rarely remember.
Every medieval village had a wise woman, sometimes feared, often respected. She didn't just know herbs, she knew seasons. In spring, she gathered willow bark for fevers. In summer, yarrow for wounds. In autumn, garlic for immunity. In winter, pine needles for vitamin C. She didn't need pills. She had patterns, the rhythm of nature. When illness came, she brewed teas, burned herbs, and wrapped wounds with moss. Even the moss had purpose. It absorbed moisture better than cloth. And in every storm, every plague, she reminded them, survival isn't about fighting nature. It's about listening to it. Perhaps the greatest survival skill of all wasn't physical. It was social. Medieval people knew no one survived alone. Every village worked like a single organism. The blacksmith repaired tools for food. The baker fed orphans for firewood. The shepherds rotated pastures to share grazing land. During winter, they gathered, not just to eat, but to remember. Stories were their warmth, songs their medicine, laughter a shield against despair. Today, we chase self-sufficiency, but they practiced shared sufficiency. They didn't hoard. They held together. So, what do we learn from them? That survival isn't about stockpiling, it's about simplifying. That warmth comes from community. That wisdom often hides in the quietest traditions. We build bunkers. They built hearths. We buy tools. They built skills. We isolate. They intertwined. And maybe that's the greatest forgotten technique of all. The art of being at peace with the elements, with others, and with oneself. So if someday the lights go out and the cold creeps in, remember the whisper of your ancestors who endured without panic, without power, only with patience, faith, and quiet ingenuity. Sleep well, and may your hearth, however small, always stay warm. When the village slept, a few stayed awake. They were called night watchers. Men and women who took turns keeping the fire alive, listening for wolves, and watching the stars. But what they guarded most wasn't safety, it was continuity. A single flame passed from one watcher to another each night, kept alive for months, even years. It symbolized endurance, a reminder that even in the blackest hours, something must stay burning. They didn't see darkness as danger. They saw it as a teacher, a time for reflection, prayer, and quiet tasks, mending clothes, sharpening blades, or whispering stories to whoever stayed awake beside them. Imagine it, a wooden stool near the hearth, the faint hiss of fire. Outside, only snow and silence. And above, the ancient sky, bright with constellations modern eyes have forgotten to name. That rhythm of night and flame trained their minds for stillness, a survival skill modern people rarely master. Because before you can survive the storm outside, you must calm the one inside. Before meteorology, there was memory. Medieval farmers could read the air like a book. They knew that when swallows flew low, rain was near. When the moon wore a halo, frost was coming. When cows lay facing east, storms approached from the west. These weren't myths, they were patterns observed for generations. They watched the color of dawn, the way the wind bent the grass, the smell of earth before rain, petrichor before the word even existed. It wasn't superstition, it was intimacy. They lived so close to the land that nature spoke and they listened. Today, we scroll for forecasts, but they simply looked up. Even their buildings were alive with intelligence. Homes were built facing east to catch the first light of sunrise, a natural alarm clock and a defense against depression in long winters. Windows were small, not because glass was rare, but because heat was precious. Thick thatched roofs, packed with reeds and mud, created insulation rivaling modern materials. They were layered so that rainwater slid outward while warm air stayed trapped inside. And beneath many homes, tunnels connected neighbors, some for storage, some for safety, some simply so they could reach each other in storms without stepping into the snow. A medieval village was a living organism, a network of warmth and movement, quietly engineered by people we now call primitive. They weren't primitive, they were precise. Even sleep itself was different. Historians call it segmented sleep. After sunset, people would sleep for 4 hours, then wake in the quiet middle of the night. They called it the watch. Some prayed, some worked, some simply sat in silence, speaking softly with family before returning to bed. This pattern matched their natural circadian rhythm, and it made them calmer, more attuned to night's peace. When they awoke before dawn, they weren't startled or tired. They were already in harmony with the day. In a world that never stopped moving, they rested twice. Modern preppers learn about weapons and food, but forget the art of rest. And yet, without rest, no one survives anything for long. But beyond every tool, every fire, and every plan was something deeper: faith. For medieval people, survival was never separate from spirituality. Before planting, they prayed. Before eating, they gave thanks. Before winter, they fasted to purify body and soul. They believed misfortune wasn't just physical, it was spiritual imbalance. So they sought protection not only in walls, but in words. Verses carved into doors, symbols painted above hearths, charms made of herbs, blessed and hung to keep sickness away. Call it superstition if you wish, but those rituals gave them something every prepper still needs: hope. Hope is the one supply you cannot store, cannot grow, and cannot buy. It must be kindled, like a flame within. Sometimes, despite all their preparation, disaster still came. Famine, fire, war, the plague. Entire villages vanished. And yet some survived, not by strength, but by silence. They hid deep in forests, living off wild herbs and mushrooms, fishing with bone hooks, collecting dew from leaves when wells ran dry. They learned to move like ghosts. No fires by night, no voices above a whisper. When danger passed, they returned, rebuilt, replanted, without bitterness, without complaint, because they knew
everything can be taken, except resilience. So when we look back now at their harsh winters and harder lives, we often pity them, but maybe we should envy them instead. They knew what truly mattered: fire, food, shelter, kinship, prayer, and they lived fully inside those simple truths. We live surrounded by abundance, yet hunger for meaning. They had nothing, yet woke each day grateful to be alive. Their secret wasn't hidden in a tool or a technique. It was in a mindset. They didn't fight nature. They flowed with it. They didn't rush time. They trusted it. And they didn't fear hardship. They expected it, and still sang through the storm. Maybe the most powerful survival skill we can relearn is not how to resist the world, but how to belong to it. And so, the fire burns lower now. The embers fade. The night grows still. If you're listening as you drift to sleep, know that within you too are the same instincts, the same quiet wisdom that kept humanity alive through centuries of dark and cold. It's written in your bones, in your breath, in your calm heart. Sleep now, traveler. The world outside may change, but the warmth within never dies.